All right, let's see if you guys can hear me. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up or tell me how the sound is. Getting this new computer set up is thumbs up. Sounds good. All right. Okay, guys. A few little glitches, but I think we're going to be kicking off pretty good here. And I have the little desk cam down here today because we're going to do a few things later on. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Now, there is a lag, as usual, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds. So when I say something, it's going to be a while before it pops up on the comment stream. So, in fact, before it even pops up in the view window. And then, of course, the comment stream. So, Longwood. Oh, David, you're just down the road from me. I drive right past Longwood going to work. So, just to let you know, there'll be a lag. We have all kinds of cool stuff to talk about today, plus whatever you guys want to chat about. And I went and dug up a few things today. And I'll give everybody who wants to a chance to check in and say something before we get rolling here. And with the things I want to talk about, which are actually pretty cool. And a lot of trucks and stuff and kit bash and things today. And, of course, typical of a new computer, I keep getting pop-ups. You want to buy this product? Here, your stream will go faster if you buy this. And I'm always afraid I'm actually going to hit the OK button instead of the cancel button, and it'll try and sell me something. Oh, it's great to see you guys, too. It's our party. We can build if we want to. Winston-Salem. All right. We live in amazing times. We all sit here in the comfort of our homes from around the globe. Ah, John, you made it great. Oh, excellent, excellent, excellent. And, all right. Well, I guess we can get started with the first thing today. I have, if you guys saw some of the recent ones, I talked about that big Ford turbine truck, which I still think belongs in the set of Star Wars. Hey, Barry. John Galt, probably my favorite literary character. Who is John Galt? Maybe a little more. I can just. Oh, you know what? Actually, I can. No, it says the volume's up all the way here. So let me. Okay, a little better. Hey, Daryl, you here? Good to see you. Sangwar. Fort Walton. Okay, we got the Florida boys are all here, and we got them all across the state, all the way Fort Walton, out on the tip of the Panhandle to where I'm at in Jacksonville, and we got guys down in Longwood and Orlando, and I believe there's somebody down here from down south a ways too. Beeswax. Okay, I actually have some of that, which came with which is used from old Badger airbrush because it uses to seal the threads. So I might give that a try. We're gonna be taught. Hey, James, you made it. It's Sledge Master. Yeah, she's feeling much better. Actually, she's pretty much healed, but I'm making her take it easy because having had slip discs myself, and Sledge Master, you'll appreciate this being a weightlifter. You know, they can feel like they're fine, but they're not really fully healed. So you got to get them some time. Tennessee. Hey, James, I was based up in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is at Kentucky-Tennessee border. It's a beautiful place up there. Okay, great. Well, you guys may remember from the past couple of videos, I was talking about that big Ford turbine truck. And I said I didn't know if anybody ever made a model. But a couple of you guys submitted to me that MKK out of Japan did make a toy. And a pretty good sized one, too. And I just think that... Now, of course, the actual truck, as you guys probably saw in the video, had a... Frank, I got it. I just downloaded the video with the Mustangs earlier. That'll be in the next viewer's build. Nice work, by the way. The truck had a double trailer. And I'm going to, when we're done here, when this gets uploaded, I'm going to put a couple of links. Really interesting stuff. There's actually a documentary, not the promotional film, but a documentary about what happened to Ford's Big Red. and it's a real detective story. But hey, Midnight. Bruce, you made it great. Oh, that's excellent. Thanks, Bruce. We're going to be talking about turnbuckles later on. So, anyway, Big Red, I assume, like, and I've been to the Henry Ford Museum, which, by the way, guys, if you ever get a chance to go, give yourself a couple of days. That's one of the greatest museums in the world. The train collection alone takes all day. And anyway, so getting back to what I say, but I thought Big Red, because it wasn't in the museum, I figured it had just been destroyed or something. But it turns out there's actually a very, very convoluted story behind what happened to it, and it's genuinely interesting, though. It was on display for a while. We're going to talk about the GM competitor to it that flopped. They talk about what killed it, which is primarily the changing emission standards, but also the truck, how it wound up in one place and then another, and then changing hands through a complete oversight on Ford's part, and it became the Amelia Earhart of tractor trailers. It disappeared. Turns out it was covertly moved someplace. It has been restored, but it's not available for public view. It's the guy who owns it managed. It had a 705 turbine engine, and the guy who found it, the engine had been. They get into how the engine had been trashed in it by a relatively simple mistake that any of us could have made, and how he managed to find a 707 engine to put in it. And it's hard to believe that somebody could go through what you have to go through to restore something that massive, and only to basically keep it a secret from the world. And there's hope someday it will end up in the Henry Ford Museum, but that's not going to happen for a while. But I'll link the documentary or the video to it when this goes up, and you guys can go check it out. But it's a really, really a genuinely interesting story. Might explain why no one ever made a model of it either, aside from being somewhat obscure, is that, normally model builders, they either get the plans or they go out and photograph the actual thing. And for Ford and Holman, the racing team and all this other stuff, yes, the tractor trailer ended up with the hands of the race. It's a long story. It's a really long story. If you're a race fan, a truck fan, a vehicle fan, or a history fan, you'll find it interesting. And this thing became like like I say, it became a real mystery. It became kind of an urban legend within a certain community. What happened to it? And there are people that have falsely claimed to own it, and oh no, we had it repainted blue and we did this with it. And turns out the trailers did get sold off and were used by racing teams, and they've probably long since been trashed, because who saves a trailer? But it's still an interesting truck. Now, what I did not know was, and I just happened to stumble onto this while doing a little bit of research on this. Sarah Jane, I'm sorry you're in the hospital. I hope you're doing well or feeling better. Bill, I don't know if they use diesel or jet fuel. My guess is they're pretty closely related. They could have run either one if it's your typical turbine. I would think it would have been designed to run on diesel fuel, just as a matter of practicality, and because jet fuel is just high grade kerosene. But General Motors didn't want to get left out, so they came up with, this little jewel. This is what they called the Bison, and yes, it had those little steering handles, the little turns instead of a big steering wheel. They're trying to be all jet age. And this is what the Bison looks like when you don't have a trailer on it. And the Bison gave way. It never worked. It was never a functioning vehicle, but it gave way to the Chevy turbine truck, which was a working, functioning vehicle, and which I think just looks freaking awesome. And the Bison up top side was more of a technology. The jet engine's actually in that pack up on top. Now tell me that does not look like it belongs in the set of Star Wars or 2001 or something, complete with the turbine whine. But that was apparently, I don't think it ever went past the mock-up stage, but the one at the bottom, and I've got a link to that video also so you can see that one. That actually was a real, honest-to-God working truck. And the Oh, there they are. You can get a little bit better look at them. Now, you'll notice that the turbine truck, Halem, scratchy here. Now, the working truck, the Chevy turbine truck up topside, oh gosh, I forgot the name. They gave it some cool name like Titan or some Turbine Titan or something like that. But it was actually, you notice there's no headlights or turn signals. It actually does have them, but those intakes are real intakes. But apparently, when you flip on the lights come out of those intakes, and very space age. But it didn't deliver a lot of. It was always considered grossly inferior to the Ford product. It had less power. They had a lot of trouble getting the reduction gear and the transmission to work because the jet engine idles at 18,000 RPM. But these are something that would have been cool to make models of. And my guess is if you could, and apparently it's really hard to find anything about the Bison on the bottom. That was just a concept thing that never went anywhere. But the one up top, they actually ran for a couple of years. But apparently it was killed the same way Ford's was because of the emission standards and all that stuff. But I just saw that and I was like, I have got to show you guys that because I had never heard of this thing before. And those are just cool. And look at what button you're pushing here, buddy. And there it is against, you can see it compared to the Ford truck. And as you can tell, the Ford's a double trailer, so of course it's got a lot more it's got a lot more pulling ability. It had, I think, over double the horsepower, and that which made the turbine a lot more practical. The other thing the Ford had going for it was, of course, the Ford had a built-in sleeper with a little kitchen area and a bathroom, and I think it had a toilet on board, but it had the little electric ladder that came out. I mean, it was real James Bond stuff. And, the 60s is kind of, I think for America, was kind of the tail end of when America was really willing to innovate. I mean, private companies were willing to go out on a limb and just try something exotic and hope they hit pay dirt. Of course, back in those days, they were flush with money also, and that had a lot to do with that. And by the 70s, of course, the situation completely reverts itself due to the oil crisis, the low quality of builds. We all know America made cars in the 70s, arguably the worst decade for American cars. And it was, of course, then the Japanese just came in and started mopping the floor with us with their great little economy cars. And what did we give them to compete with? The Vega, the Chevette. I mean, talk about crap on wheels. And then I actually remember, how many of you guys remember a crappy little car from Chevrolet called the Citation? I think was it Chrysler? Somebody put out the same car called the Phoenix, but it was, and that car had more recall notices. Believe it or not, even the crummy little Chevette outlasted it, because the Chevette sold itself as a super basic car, just a cheap set of wheels that could get 40 miles a gallon on the highway. And to its credit, until the wheels fell off, it did. And they used to use Joey Chitwood and his stunt team that always used Chevettes. And everybody went, oh, they must be tough. Joey Chitwood uses them. And I'm like, no, dude, Joey Chitwood uses them because they're bloody disposable. The car was less than $3,000 brand new. He can trash them after 2 or 3 shows, just throw them away and repaint, buy new ones. Yeah, the Citation, it was. It really was. A friend of mine had a Citation. I mean, it got us around. The car just had a lot of recall notices. The Fishbone. I remember when the Pacer came out, and you know what? The Pacer still has a pretty hardcore following today. There are a lot of them have been preserved. Not very many Chevettes have been preserved because they couldn't be, because they were made of such cheap material. They literally just fell apart. I mean, there were actually cases where the wheels fell off of them. Of course, I can say the same thing about a couple of Volkswagens. This is true. The 70s was a weak time for everybody. Well, except the Japanese. They're the ones who... But thanks to Dr. Robert Deming, who had taught them total quality management when Chrysler and the U.S. auto industry thumbed their nose at it. So the Japanese put a lot of effort into making these. And admittedly, the first Japanese imports were as crappy as anything ever imported, but it didn't take them long to fix their problems. They were highly responsive to the customer needs. For the American and European customers, you guys know that the Japanese, buying a Datsun in Japan was not the same as buying one in the U.S. And I've seen some of the actual ones, maybe the Japanese market, and they were as They were not as good. Let's put it that way. Oh yeah, the Chevette was a friend of mine. I rode in one. A friend of mine had one. And we were going along, and I was like, God, finally something you could drag race in a Volkswagen Beetle. The Pacer. The Pacer. I got to tell you, the very first time I got to see New York City, a person was giving me a ride around New York in a Pacer, and all that glass was great because I could see the skyscrapers. You have really good visibility out of that car, which of course over time destroyed the interiors because it let all the sunlight in, which was something no one thought about. If you kept the car garaged, it wasn't that big of a problem. But the Pacer was definitely a leg up on the Chevette or and I think, although the Citation arguably might be able to carry a little more, but the joys. And I bet all of us had something like that when we were in college or whatever. Actually, Frederick, you talk about the AMC Eagle. That was an out of the box 4-wheel drive car with a 4-wheel drive on the fly switch you could throw. I know a lot of people that really stand by that car. They love it because it was kind of the first crossover, one might say. And I know a lot of people that really think that car gets short shrift. It was probably the best thing, one of the best things AMC put out. I've never ridden in one. I never had one. I remember seeing them. I always thought they were a little goofy because they sat so high off the ground. But a lot of people really like that. Now, the Gremlin I know, Rich, because my sister had one. That was her first car. In fact, that's what I took my driver's license test in when I was 16, was her Gremlin. That made parallel parking easy, rear end. And one of my best buddies in high school, we ran everywhere in his Pinto, the Ford Firebomb. And he kept that thing running. He'd had a British Spitfire before that, the car, and that thing was always in the shop. He was always having to work it. The Pinto was more or less, it was what it was. He drove it until it just about rusted out, but it went, it was surprisingly durable. And the Gremlin, my sister's Gremlin met a horrendous fate that no car should face. She loved that car, and it was legally parallel parked. And in the middle of the night, somebody just driving down the street, probably some drunk, just smashed into it and took off and totaled it out. And the car was sitting there perfectly legally parked, minding its own business. But a thrush muffler and Hurst shifter on a 73 Volkswagen. Hoorah! Those cars were also getting towards the end of when you could really do stuff to your car. The Le Car. Dude, where's my Le Car? The Le Car, I've never ridden in one. I don't know if I would fit in one, but I guess you could call it the French Beetle. But the nice thing is there's models of it out there. If you want to build one, you can. But I don't think I've ever seen a perfectly stock Le Car. Everybody's always either repainted them or just done something to them. And it seems to be an extreme, let's just call it easy car to modify. Oh, yeah, you'd have definitely been better about bringing your VW back. And I imagine all of us have probably ridden in Beetles and Chevettes and Citations. I mean, these cars were so prolific back then. But they all shared something that was extremely important, and it's in the vein of Henry Ford's Model T. All of these cars were affordable to the average working, or even high school or college student. They really, if Red Bull gives you wings, these cheap cars gave people wheels. And they really did democratize transportation. And for that, we have to be grateful to them. You John on an Electra. You're 16 and you're taking your that's okay. You're 16 and you're taking your driver's test in a land yacht. Did that come complete with a foghorn? Oh yeah. You guys probably remember the commercial with Ginger Lacey. Where with the British Spitfire fighter playing the Spitfire car, it shows them the hands cranking each other up, and and Ginger Lacey was actually there when they filmed that. They had a picture of him sitting in the cockpit. The guy was an ace when he was like 17 years old. And anyways, the Spitfire takes off with the Spitfire car driving beside it. And of course, the driver of the car is dressed in like RAF flying gear, and he's got the cute girl in the seat with him. And as the car goes down the runway and the plane lifts off, and you see it flying away, retracting. And I still remember that tagline, which is the motto of good advertising: "When you buy a Spitfire, You know, to get a car and a pretty girl, but a piece of history. And it says that as the Spitfire's flying away with the gear retracting, and I'm just sitting there going, and that probably sold a few cars. I'm just reading some of the comments here. Electra had a dance floor option. You know, I think you could put an H on the hood with a circle around it and give the helicopters a place to land. But yeah, they were the days when you know, big meant luxurious and comfortable and stylish and everything. Now, here's one for you. We saw that. Okay. A lot of you guys have asked me about the actually, let me just. I don't think this is the turbine motor that was in those trucks, but it is a kit model of a production turbine motor from Ford. I don't think that's the 705 or the Ford wound up selling all their technology to another company. But speaking of turbine trucks and turbine powered cars and stuff, the Japanese company Gakken did make a 1/8 scale Ford turbine engine in, I think, the late 60s, early 70s, and in 75 Intex put it back in production. So that would, and that, I don't know, I couldn't see what model of engine that was, but I always found it interesting how much effort they put into these turbine truck engine ideas, because they were, you know, definite gas guzzlers. And 74 that Intex repopped it. But they're also, I would think, because they have all the innards in them, make a great, you know, like training tool or something, or educational tool, because those Allison engines that Atlantis is repopping and the turbine engines and stuff, as much as I know about turbine engines, even when I look at those things, I learn some stuff. Was it Litton? That sounds right. And I don't know what they eventually did with it, but turbine technology is turbine technology. They did have one problem, though, and it's one of the reasons the guy that owns the Big Red today doesn't want it on display. He doesn't want his house being turned into a museum. And see, he made no bones about it. He didn't want a bunch of strangers coming around his house. But he's at the 707 engine in it. But what's interesting, though, is that those parts are irreplaceable now. That's one reason, although he runs it from time to time. Well, I think Yugoslavia falling apart had a lot to do with Yugo falling apart, Raymond, I would assume. Turbine engine, the Indy 500. Interesting. But the technology that you have with turbine engines is they burn a lot of fuel even when they're idling. And we frequently taxi the jets on one engine just to save some fuel. They're running about 51% at idle, because obviously, as you guys know, they need that much RPM to be self-sustaining. But once you get them moving, though, that's when the efficiency kicks in. The turbine trains didn't work out too well, like the Big Blow and those others. They made too much noise and guzzled too much gas. But in a tractor trailer for long haul, they actually did make acceptable efficiencies. The problem turned out not to be fuel efficiency on the open highway. The problem turned out to be emissions. And since a jet engine turbine runs virtually completely on pure exhaust, that was just no way they were going to get the emissions down where people wanted it. But I thought it's cool that they made a model of the engine. And speaking of models, you guys, what I was going to say, a couple of you guys had asked about was, you guys remember Advent? Because I think I remember seeing them in the stores. And Advent, I've had a lot of inquiries about it, but Advent is just Revell. And Revell apparently wanted a big box store El Cheapo kit. So they took some of their, I don't know if they were out of production kits or whatever, but for, I think 79, 80, it was only around about a year. But they created from whole cloth the idea of, hey, let's just come up with a new brand, because I don't think they wanted to taint their name with lower quality kits. And I'm assuming they used older molds, but they just started shooting out these low-cost kits they could sell to the big box stores of the day in bulk for cheap. And judging by they were doing this in the late 70s, around 1980, I'm assuming part of the problem was this is when sales in kit models are really dropping off. And I believe that they wanted to. Yes, Bob. Johan did. In fact, Johan did probably one. A lot of people think the best kit of the Chrysler Turbine car. The kit model companies were just trying to come in new ways. So the kit was pretty basic, and it was their way of just trying to, hey, let's compete on price. We're never going to beat Tamiya on quality, and Tamiya buyers are going to buy Tamiya. So let's just go ahead and make a very basic model, and something that we already have the molds for, and we'll just use that to compete with Tamiya and Hasegawa, and we'll go on price, not on quality. And it apparently did not do so well. I'm sure they sold plenty of kits, but I doubt the markup was very high, and the relatively short lifespan of Advent pretty much tells you the whole story in and of itself. Of course, this is also when Revell was about to undergo some serious changes. I think it was 82 or 83. They sold out to Compagnie des Jouets, the French toy company, and that's actually that may. When did they sell out? That actually may have happened after they sold out to Compagnie des Jouets. That may have been the French's idea. I'm getting a little confused on the years. Oh, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. No worries. This is not a it's not a mandatory formation. It's a strictly come out and have fun. This thing says I've got poor stream status, and I upped the bit rate, but this is the problem with when you need to change the video resolution. How do I do that? Take a second here. Video. Well, nothing. Video output is currently active. Well, I'll just have to change that next time. Turn off any outputs to change it. Well, I'm not going to do that while in the middle of a stream. So as long as you guys can see what's going on, I guess we're good. I'll have to do that later. But that should answer the questions about Advent. As you can tell, they just recycled the instruction sheets from Revell. I remember that box art. I remember building the B-57 Canberra model when I was a kid, and I was looking at it going, I don't know what this airplane is, and I thought I knew a lot about airplanes, but somehow it had gotten past me. But very straightforward kit. These are the kind of kits I grew up building, nothing too complex. Somebody also asked about another company called Panda in New Zealand. And Panda was a fairly short-lived kit company that did reboxes of, I forget, it was Marusan kits, but they weren't around that long, but apparently, I guess they never got out of New Zealand, because the only people that... Now, this is not the modern Panda models or Panda plastics. There's been...
You have a phone call.
Okay. I did not put this on airplane mode, and some phone solicitor decided to interrupt our fun. And now it's in airplane mode. But these were sent in by, I believe it was Paul down in New Zealand, who these are his old ones he built as a kid. He found them recently. He's in the process of going to repaint them and everything. But a lot of the kits were 1:100 scale, and I had some folks ask about the old Panda out in New Zealand, and you really can't find out much about them on the internet. And I believe it's one of those companies that was sort of like Intex, where they just got the kits shipped in and then boxed them themselves, and apparently sold them locally, which is something you can do. I don't know what the complications of international trade are if you're getting something out of China, or Japan. Of course, this is back in the 70s. But there were some questions about that, and I just thought I would toss that out there real quick since he's actually drummed up a lot of the information for me, so I'll probably put out a video on him at some point. But he's right. Yeah. My wife and I have one of those Star Trek intercoms up on the wall that you just walk by and it goes off. So and I was just standing there and hit the button while it was doing its thing. I just talked on the phone, made my own ringtone. Yeah, the B-57 is an interesting airplane. Of course, the Americans Martin made a lot of modifications to it, put the tandem cockpit on it, gave both crew member ejection seats. I was always kind of curious, why did the United States, the mighty United States, buy a foreign built aircraft? And apparently the B-57, the Canberra, was just really, really good at what it did. And it doesn't look it, but it's actually a pretty fast airplane. It could go really high. In fact, NASA wound up putting ridiculously long wings on a couple of them and making extremely high altitude research aircraft out of them. And of course, that's the American version. But although, like I say, it really doesn't look it, really is a very fast airplane, and it was a little ahead of its time. It was extremely effective in Vietnam. They did a lot of night work with them, and it was just a good interdiction bomber. And they use these cartridges to start them, and they use, I guess, black powder, and you see them starting, and the airplane just gets enveloped in this gigantic black cloud of smoke, enough to get the fire department out there. Yeah, the B-57F, yeah. That makes sense, that they would, that importing, because I guess something's considered, if you, Shep Payne, Shepard Payne. Yes, I actually started writing the script on a Shepard Payne video. It turns out a bunch of books were written about him. And as you guys know, Shepard Payne was the master diorama maker, and he put out a lot of books on, actually, I should say, he put out books on making dioramas. I think there might have been a book put out of him posthumously. That's one of those projects that I started, and somehow it just got lost in the weeds, but I am still planning on doing it. The one thing you have to be real careful about, since he's passed away, is that try to get your information straight, because he's got family and stuff that would probably be more than a little annoyed if you got the facts wrong. And yeah. The Americans, the one thing, they actually have a Canberra. I think it's in Canadian markings down here in Titusville at the, what do they call it? At the Titus, not Plains of Fame. I've been there, and the name's escaping me at this second, but it's part of the Historic Air Command. But in fact, I think they're the ones that owned that Avenger that just went into the beach, which, by the way, they dragged ashore and recovered. But the British one, what I didn't appreciate was that the British Canberra, you have the pilot sitting up there in that little bubble that they have. The nose is different, but you actually had a couple of guys down inside the fuselage, below and behind the cockpit, and they each had a tiny little window on the side, and that was their crew station. And I think it was the Australian reconnaissance version. They had an elongated nose on it, and they actually put a operator up there in the nose section, and the nose would like clamshell. The entire nose section would swing open. He'd get in, and they'd swing it shut and close it. And that's got to be fun to try and bail out of. But it turned out to be a pretty flexible airframe. Valiant Air Command. No, it's not Titusville Warbirds. I can't believe I'm forgetting. But anyway, it's a pretty decent museum, actually. When I first went there, I saw one hangar. Well, I didn't like much, but then you realize it blocks the other hangars. They have a massive collection down there. They have pretty much one of everything of importance, and some of which are still leaking oil, so they're just the way they got them from the military. And TICO, the TICO Warbird Museum, that's it, TICO. And unfortunately, I guess they're closed for COVID. When I went down to do some pistol requalification for my reserve law enforcement certification, I had to. I figured they're right next door, and so I went in and everything was locked up. So great. And if you guys ever watch my Godzilla versus the Wehrmacht video, the Tiger tank that you see rolling with the gunpowder burning around it, and everything was just rolling in a straight, or the one that's rolling in a straight line, you see three of them side by side. That's actually one tank filmed 3 times from a tripoded camera and split screened. But I actually bought that for $25 at the Tico Museum, and it was a nice, roughly 135 scale Tiger tank, Tiger 2, that was just, it had a motor in it. You turn up, and it just goes in a straight line. It's not an RC or anything. It's like a free flight airplane. Just turn it on, watch it go straight. But $25, you can't go wrong. And that was, it's like, yeah, give me 4. I just bought one and filmed it from a different. Oh yeah, Revell did Herbie the Love Bug, absolutely. In fact, they had to go to Disney to get the rights for that. Have you ever built Oddball's tank from Kelly's? No, I haven't. But it's. I mean, I built some Shermans, but not his Sherman. You got to give the movie Kelly's Hero credit. They really did try to make something that looked like a Tiger tank, even though it was built on a Russian chassis. And the turret, like, the Porsche thing with the turret way forward. But it was better than just painting up a Patton tank, which is what everybody else, or a Sherman, which is what everybody else was doing. Herbie said that very little of the original airframe, basically a giant flying wing. Yeah, it is. It actually looks weird. But they made it work, so points for success. Now, let's play a little game. And yes, this is a trick question. Identify this airplane. Let me blow the image up. Oops. Give you a little bit better look at it there. And yes, this is a trick question. Everything you guys are typing exactly the guesses I was making. Lanson P-80. Come on, F-94. What is this thing? AMC Pacer with wings. Okay. I stumbled on to, while I was researching this, I stumbled on to this. This is a fictitious model that was kit bashed by, I believe the guy's name is Tom. He's out of New Zealand. But he does a bunch of what-if aircraft. There's his link. And it's worth taking a look at because some of his aircraft are just what-if, like, a British Messerschmitt or something like that. But some of them are actually really very nicely done kit bashes. And these are just a little slide or two together. I emailed him and told him that I was going to talk about his channel, but I'd never made contact with him. But he has got the art of the kit bash down pat. And I like kit bashing and doing what if stuff also, and I was just very impressed with his work. And it got me wondering about, what do you get? The jet at the top, he calls, I think what he called the F-96 Bright Star, which is just something he made up. And I looked at the quality of his work, and I was like, this is really nice work, and that alone is something to be impressed by. But I was just thinking, I have trouble getting kits to look right that when I don't modify them. And it's like what Tom Daniel, TD, did with that German airplane that he sent me. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at the actual raw prime model, and I can't even see the seams. I'm doing something wrong in my sanding and filing, because I tend to lose the detail. Yet somehow the putty still shows. I had double of a time getting seams to look right. Everybody's got their weakness. That's one of my kryptonites. And yeah, that twin boom Defiant, I think that's exactly what he called it. And this is just a sample. He's got some of this stuff is really pretty exotic. He should be working in Hollywood making movies for models for movies. But yeah, he's got some. What did you get about? Yeah, actually, I got a bunch of just parts laying around. And at some point, I told myself, at some point, I'm going to take all this crap and I'm going to use it on one model. I don't know if they'll just be Greeblies or what, but I am going to use it. Actually, Mike, in the thing, somebody mentioned the F-84 when they talked about this thing. They had here. I'll show you exactly what they were selling. Somebody was selling this old angle of attack indicator. There he goes. This is a real honest to God. Oh, by the way, Mike, I'm glad you're here. This is a real honest to God angle of attack indicator. Let me just. There we go. Now I know most of you guys know what that is. Just real quick for those who don't, an airplane. You have the wind hitting the nose. If you have a zero angle of attack, the nose, the wing of the airplane, and the wind are coming directly onto each other. But as the airplane pitches up, or pitches down for that matter, it changes the angle that the wing attacks the wind. And of course, the difference between the chord line, the direction of the wing, and the relative air, the gap is the angle of attack. And almost all aircraft will stall at 17 plus degrees angle of attack. You get past 17 degrees, you can't get smooth airflow. Few airplane are different, but the average airplane, that's pretty much where it gives up the ghost, sometimes even less. And in jets, like the old military jets, and this is believed to be out of an F-84, the angle of attack is super critical because if you stall a jet down low, you're in a world of hurt. So a lot of the pilots would set the power and they would fly the angle of attack indicator, and the speed would just fall into where it's supposed to. And a lot of military fighters have an AOA, or angle of attack indicator, a little one with two little arrowheads and a donut in the middle. And they have it right there on the frame of the canopy, so as the pilot's flying on the carrier, he can make sure that donut's staying between those two those two little arrowheads. As long as it is, he's got a proper angle of attack. It's an AOA indicator. And if he can see the guy with the Fresnel lens, he can see the landing signal officer, and he's lined up in that AOA center, and he's configured, he just jockeys the throttle to keep everything in place. And but anyway, so that's one of the instruments that the old pilots live by. And if you see a thing going in the yellow or the red, you got to get the nose down. And to give you an idea just how critical something like that is, let's say you're flying down, you're flying slow for your maybe landing configuration. You see you feel like you're mushing into the trees. If you pick some pilots in a light airplane, a lot of times you can do this. You can pitch the nose up just a little bit to lift the plane up. But in a heavy swept wing fighter jet, you're not going to get away with that. And if you start picking the nose up to try and to get to the runway, and that AOA goes in the yellow or the red, you've got to add power. You've got to, and it's better to keep the nose down and get the power in and get your speed built up before you do it, because especially the slow reaction times of those old jet engines, especially the big ones like the Plenums, the big like we're in the Cougars and the Panthers. Those things, you had to get that big turbine wheel spinning. I think it was a lot of mass. You added the throttle, you could have 7, 12, 14 seconds before actual power delivery. And angle of attack was super, super critical. That's one of the things that would just beat you in the head with, needle ball airspeed, angle of attack in your training to keep you alive. And there's plenty of footage. You probably got YouTube see of guys. You see the nose start coming up as they're approaching the carrier. And since carriers film all their landings, that's one reason there's so much footage available. But you'll see the nose coming up and up and up. And I'm like, no, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. Because you're bleeding your speed, you're losing your energy. You need to be adding power. But those old engines often didn't respond that fast, and it's a pilot's natural instinct to pull back on the stick. And in general aircraft, this is replaced usually with a stall warning horn. And, oh God, I spent 1,611 hours flight instructing, a lot of it in Cessnas. and you spend about 5-10% of your time teaching stalls. So you're just flying like, let's start trying to teach the student. When you hear that, ease the nose down, add some power, and we actually had a mishap, a genuine, honest to God, I don't call it what it was, a crash, although thank God no one got killed or anything. The company I worked at years ago, Mesa Airlines, I still remember the pilot's name, but I'm not going to say it here. They were taking off out of Bangor, and you can probably go on AvWeb and look this up, the Beech 1900D. And the Cessnas, and a lot of general aviation aircraft just use this little metal tongue that sticks out of the wing, and if you get close to a stall, the wind will shift and it will push that tongue, and it'll make an electric connection. You get the stall warning horn. Now, it's a stall warning horn. It goes off before you stall. And even though the Beech 1900 is technically an airliner, it still used that general aviation style little mechanical switch sticking out. Well, the problem was they're up in Bangor, and one of the little gotchas in the 1900, and guys knew about this, was it gets real cold, those things could stick. And it would cause bogus stall warning signals. And at least this is the way it was explained to me in ground school. But if you're taking off, the airplane's clean, and you got plenty of speed, and you ease up and the stall warning horn goes off, just check your airspeed and keep flying, because it's probably a bogus signal. This is a winter operations kind of thing. The pilot was taking off. I think the FO was actually, I think the first officer was flying. And as soon as he rotated and the wheels left the ground, now they had like a 12,000 foot runway, because Bangor's an old bomber base, got this 2+ mile runway. And they're taking off, and the horn goes off, and it's winter operations. Everything's frozen and snowy and stuff, but the wings are clean. And out of instinct, the thing in aviation is once you hit V1, you're going, or you're flying. And whatever it is, you handle it in the air and come back, because it's more dangerous to try and put it back down. Well, as soon as the first officer rotated and the plane left the ground, they get the whee, just like a Cessna stall horn. And the captain said, put it back down, because they had so much runway left. And the first officer's like, no, we can't do that. And the captain said, I have control. Took the control, chopped the power, put the plane back down. But you got to remember, you're in takeoff configuration with partial flaps. You're going really fast. Captain put the plane back down with flying speed in a takeoff configuration. And when he did, the nose wheel folded, and the plane started doing 360s down the runway. And the blade tips at the ground and separated, and a chunk of blade tip, I believe, came through the side of the airplane and actually injured a passenger, because those Kevlar blades, when they splinter, that's little bits of shrapnel coming off of them. And the plane wasn't totaled. I mean, it collapsed the nose gear and knocked the nose cone off. And I think there were a couple of injuries from some small punctures. But what happens is the FAA, of course, and the company, and even the union, come down on him and like, sorry, dude, this ain't gonna fly. Pardon the pun. And he lost his job, and I'm pretty sure he did go find another job. But all of that was because he trusted a stall warning horn when he shouldn't have. That's because stall warning horns are off or on. That's why a lot of aircraft, and including the one I fly, have an angle of attack indicator, because you can see it move. It's much more honest. And the whole idea is they don't want you responding to a horn that goes off like you do in a general aviation aircraft. But that was one of those rare times when he actually should have ignored something. But his conditioning was so thorough that when the stall warning horn goes off, you push the nose over, boop, there you go. And luckily, no one got killed or anything. But went down the rabbit hole on that one. The reason I bring up the angle of attack indicator is I was snooping around and I saw this for sale. And the website, this is how I ended up over at his site. The website had this picture, and I was like, what the heck kind of plane is that? And they said that this thing came out of an F-94, Thunderflash or Thunderstreak. And I was like, looking at, is that an F-94? That's not an F-94. The tail's wrong. No, wait a minute. And I sat there just scratching my head going, come on, Mr. Know-It-All. So I finally started, I found the picture just in a Google image search, put in F-90. Somebody said it was either an F-94 or an F-96. Well, apparently, this is what I think happened. somebody had stumbled onto his website, thought that was a real airplane, and used the picture in their advertisement to sell that angle of attack indicator. And I found out going to Air War 1946 Netherlands and finding Tom's channel, he's got a lot of cool stuff in there. Boy, we went a long way to get to that one, didn't we? Yeah, that's what we're here for. Have a good time and just chat about models and stuff. But beautiful work. I'm not really... The thing, oh yeah, just to add a little... he comes up with complete bogus histories for the aircraft. He talks about how many of these were prototyped and when they entered service and how many of them the Air Force used and what conflicts they were in. I mean, he gives them a full bio, which is a nice touch. Alessandra from Bremen. Good Tag. Welcome aboard. So you guys, I'm just leaving this up there so you can get his link. You might have fun going out there and getting a look at that. And nice work too. I mean, it just okay. I don't even see the seams. That looks like a P-80 or T-33 scoop. Not sure about the nose. Canopy. That might be a two-seater. I think it's a single-seater. Looks like an F-86 rear end, I think. I don't know. That might be an F-94 tail. Didn't have a chance to look into it, but he did nice work. Now, that's small enough you can see the whole thing here. I was going to show you guys something also here. This is I put the desk cam back in operation. Now that my wife has my old computer in her room. She didn't need a little extra camera. We had talked about forced perspective. Yeah, that was a nice touch, Mike. If you guys, I had noticed that. Let me show you guys something real quick that he did on that. A nice touch on that. Oh, come on, where is it? There it is. If you got here, let me blow this up for you. You guys look on that nose wheel, you will notice he's got a kicker plate, a mud guard on it. You see these on Russian aircraft a lot, which means somebody figured the airplane might be taken off of a mud field or a grass field, which is odd because it does not appear to have low pressure tires, if I may pick a nit. But it does show you that they were planning for it to operate out of some kind of rough area and keep crap off the belly of the airplane. They might have installed something sensitive underneath. And you know, there's a real danger that rarely happens, but it does on landing gears. We had a Dornier 328 turboprop airliner that was taking off, and it was a slushy runway. They had all their de-ice on and everything. They did everything the way they were supposed to. But it just so happened that another stuff was just the right consistency that as they were rolling down the runway, the nose gear was throwing the stuff up into the wheel well. And when they pulled the gear, it was actually impacted with ice, and the nose gear got about halfway and locked. It just stuck. It just because all the ice. And they wound up having to come back, get the gear down, and land because it had just been impacted with crap. And things like this are supposed to keep that kind of stuff from damaging the aircraft. Like I say, you normally see them on low pressure tires, but I had noticed that it was a neat trick. If you guys look at a DC-9 from Douglas in the MD-80s, and as a kid I always wondered what it was, the nose gear has this flat plate, basically U-shaped flat plate that sits horizontally, bolts the axles, goes around the back of the tire. And I was never sure what it was. And it sits pretty low to the ground. And what it does is, as that nose wheel spins, it's a deflector plate, and anything that gets kicked up, dirt or debris or fought off the runway, gets knocked back down. Because those engines are back in the tail. If the nose wheel kicks something up, it's very likely to go over the wing and into the engine, which did happen to a friend of mine's Bach 111, which is that helped put his airline out of business. He had a little 3-airplane airline, and for maintenance reasons, they were down to 1 airplane. They were going out of Miami, and the nose tire picked up a chunk of rebar about the size of your little finger, tossed it right over and into an engine, and they aborted the takeoff. It separated a piece of N1 blade, and they wound up, or turbine blade, I mean, and they ended up, that was the last operational airplane they had. One was down for a D check, and the other one had been grounded for some other reason, so they were down to running their turboprops, and they weren't able to survive. But that is one of the reasons you'll notice a lot of aircraft, they try to put, on fighter planes, they try to put the nose gear behind the intakes when they can. That's actually a serious issue. FOD, foreign object damage off a runway, especially if you're operating off of unimproved strips. Even Harriers apparently have that problem because they have those massive intakes and they're blowing up all that stuff. They've got problems. They have to be careful about sucking crud into the engines. Jet engines are tough, but they're not indestructible. Okay. So, what I was going to point out was we had been chatting about forced perspective shots, and I thought I would just show this one that was okay, which one am I? These are some of my models from the I took out of the shelf for this. Now, I deliberately put the camera and the lighting on a low position like this, but the idea is just to show how a forced perspective can fool you. Let me go ahead and put this on top. Now, all of these kits are of different scales, and actually this one's probably out of place. Let me move that one. Let me put this one up there where you can see the outline. Yeah, the only thing I was going to do where the forced perspective was concerned is just show that when you're displaying your kits or want to take pictures of them, a lot of people talk about, well, I don't have they're not of the same scale. Well, if you play it right, you can. Put the smaller scale models further back. Smaller scale kits go further back, and don't have them overlap. Now, these kits are of radically different scales. The helicopter, the C-47, this is the... Oh, by the way, you guys remember this kit? This is, to my knowledge, the only monogram kit that was sold pre-painted and pre-decaled. This is their Puff the Magic Dragon. Artwork was done by Morgan. I've got the box to this up in the Tarbis on display, but you just build this kit. It's already pre-painted. And but anyway, the Jeep is a die-cast. This is a Vietnam-era Jeep. It's about a, I'm not exactly sure what that scale is. I'd say 1 to 35-ish. And it's literally overlapping the wingtip of the and the tail of the helicopter actually goes further out. But if you take it from the right angle, take the photograph from the right angle, it creates a false sense of depth as long as everything gets smaller as it goes further back. We have this tank, which is about a 1 to 100 scale, I guess, and 1 to 70. Yeah, I'd say about 1 to 100, something like that. And but and of course you can see when it's sitting beside the Jeep that clearly they're completely off scale to one another. Even though ironically I think these are Corgis, I think they came in the same box. But put it a little bit aft of it, take the photograph from a flat angle where the depth cannot be seen, and you wind up with a monogram F-105 is also pre-painted in Vietnam era. I did not know that. The 105 that I've got, which is the one my brother built, which is a 105G, had to be painted and everything. But anyway, you see that you can photograph your kits from different scales, and so if you've got, yeah, and then of course, and you can display them in your shelf that way. Actually, some museums I've been to that were confined for space, they would use forced perspective and small scale models in these deep boxes to try and you have to use a little imagination with it, but you can make photographs that are incredibly convincing. And as Mike can tell you, that there are all kinds of illusory tricks that can be pulled, and I think the human brain will fill in the gaps, and we have a. I take a sip of water here. But if you get something out of place, though, then of course, if I put this helicopter right here, well, I guess right here, it blows the whole perspective. Like, that doesn't look right. But put it back up here. Let me give it something to sit on where you can see it here. Set it right here, and all of a sudden, it more or less, looks like it belongs there. Which I used a lot of this when I did the Exodus diorama, because a lot of the models are off scale. Those trucks and everything were completely off scale from everything else. So I just set them on the far end of the board and photographed them from a flat angle. But obviously this will not work if you photograph it from an angle where you can see that, if you look down on them, you spoil the entire, well, here, I'm going to move the camera, watch your eyes. Here it looks believable, but from this angle, no way. You're not going to sell that. That Jeep's clearly too big. But set it down here, and all of a sudden it looks like you're driving across the airport. Focus is a big part of that also. You need to have a wide focal length, which your camera, you can see how to set it up. That was one of the mistakes I was making. A lot of the early photos I took, and then I realized if I used a wider focal length, all of a sudden everything's in focus, which this is just a little fixed focus camera. Again, put something and there you go. You can pass it off. Of course, it's a little out of focus there, and you can actually get them surprisingly close to each other and still sell the illusion, provided things get progressively smaller, preferably at the same rate. Depth of field, and and I enjoy this hobby. I enjoy buying the models, I enjoy building the models, I enjoy displaying the models, I love photographing the models, and I love doing the videos. That's probably why I'm so wrapped up in this hobby. It's got more than just the kits themselves, and again, all you got to do to blow the end. Oh, look, those tanks are all the wrong size. That doesn't fit. One of these things is not like the other, because clearly that ain't gonna work. Oh, make this my special ops desk. Anyone have the best Pappy Boyington? Well, I'll tell you, as we all know, was it Revell that put out the Boyington Corsair, which is just their regular Corsair with the different markings on it. But I think someone recently put out a bird cage in Boyington's markings, and I forget who it was. Oh man, I remember seeing it, and if I'm not mistaken, Boyington actually flew the birdcage model of the airplane. But and of course there's also the birdcage aftermarket birdcage canopies you can buy. Rotor blade sagging on that thing. And I'll show you another real quick you see that kind of passes off because you figure the size of the building. Well, actually that building's a little off scale, I guess. But using something like descending sizes in buildings is another good way to help sell the illusion. What amazed me was when I started doing this is how fast big things get small when you cover some distance. Like, yeah, it was Revell, yeah, and I believe that was Ira Kepford's Corsair in the original kit, and they just, of course, they sold what essentially was the same kit with Boyington's markings, but as I understand it, those are also the markings from the TV show. They were not accurate to the actual markings of his airplane. Although I do think he did name it Lula Bell, or at least I've read that. Been a while since I've looked at it. Yeah, you can get away with a lot inside of a camera, and I've been watching a lot of those Pierce Films sense of scale videos, and they're, especially back in the old days, they were the masters of what they called the in-camera special effects, and that literally means by use of tricks like scale and forced perspective. They actually got the special effect in the camera when they filmed the scene. And the problem you run into there, obviously, is that if it doesn't turn out right, you don't know it until you get everything produced. Back in those days, they didn't have all the video monitors that they have today. So I'll just move that over there. So those are just the things I thought were cute that I would talk about today. So now I'm going to throw it over to you guys. What do you want to talk about now? Oh, I have finally conditioned myself to say Caterham about the car. And I actually, I told you guys, I believe, that I somehow managed to misplace those paint brushes. And by the way, in case you're wondering, that photograph, that is of me skydiving back in the late 1970s. That's at Sandy Z in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I think somebody asked about that. And, ooh, time does make a little changes, huh? But, so the, I need to go out and check the empty boxes outside in case somehow I put them back. But it's driving me nuts because somebody, and it's just a pack of paintbrushes, but it's the idea that you had it in your hand, you put it down somewhere, and now you can't find it. And it's driving me bonkers. What do you fly? I fly an Embraer 190. I could have gone on the Airbus 320 a long time ago, but my seniority on the Embraer is so good that I can get holidays off and stuff, and I don't want to give that up. I have a great deal of flexibility in my schedule, which is the kind of the gold standard in aviation. It's funny when you're young and immortal. It's all about flying the cool equipment, and as you, shall we say, become more mature, days off, control your schedule, things like that become more important. Now, I feel it's only fair to point out that I do surrender a reasonable amount of income to have that kind of control, but I was going to go on the Airbus about 5 years ago, and my wife and I go through this little exercise every year. Like, I'm going to go on the Airbus now. I'm senior enough I can stay in Orlando, and my much more mature than me wife will go, okay. When was the last time you had to fly a red eye? A few years ago. When was the last time you had to work at Christmas? And when was the last time you had to work a weekend? You know, before long, fine, I'll stay on the Embraer because I'm in the top 12% of the pilots there. So, it just gets down to the point that I always wondered, am I more greedy or lazy? And if you guys are familiar with the lift-over drag diagram, there's the greed factor here, and it goes this way, and then there's the lazy factor here, and it goes that way. And in aviation, it's lift over drag, and where they cross is L over D max. That's your most efficient point that you can fly the airplane. And the airplane I fly at 37,000 feet, we call it a pitch limit indicator, but it's a little, well, we have a little angle of attack indicator up on our heads-up display and on our primary flight display. And if I can keep that thing right about 1.7, 1.8 degrees above the nose, I know I'm flying the airplane at its most efficient point. Well, with me, given the money that I make and the time off at a certain amount of income, you just go, okay, all my greed has been sated. Now I can let my laziness and sloth take over from there. So you stay at that point where you're making enough money that you're happy with what you're making, but you have enough time off and enough flexibility of your schedule to have a happy lifestyle. And I found that little LOD max, and I don't think I'll ever, if I go to the Airbus, I'll make more money, but it'll come at the cost of quality of life. So, can you hear, see? Yeah. If you want to go at the beach, you can see. I mean, it's you're going to do a lot better if you go about an hour south of here. When Elon Musk shot his Tesla around Mars, I was at Longhorn in Daytona, and I was watching on my phone. About 30 seconds before it lifted off, I just walked out in the parking lot, and there it went. Daytona has restaurants exactly 1 hour south of here. I can go out of the beach. I have watched them from here, but that's got to be just crystal clear visibility or a clear night. The night launches are the easiest to see. Ponte Vedra Bridge, a few miles south of here, is a good place. And by the way, guys, despite what you might have seen on the History Channel, it's Ponte Vedra, not Ponte Verde. But Ponte Vedra is about 15 miles south of here. They have a bridge that's one of those high, so this, it's not doesn't have to do that crap. The sailboats can just go right under it. It's on over the intercoastal. That's a good viewing place, and the beach is a good viewing place. So yeah, you can see them. If from top of a good building or out at the beach, you definitely can see them from here. Yes, living the life. And you better get paid for jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. Actually, even though I was in the 101st Airborne Division, that's the Sport Parachute Club. And, oh, look at this. I can actually point to it. If you look, what I'm showing off there, that's 2 parachutes on my back. That's a brand shiny new in 1981 or 82. That's a brand new Wonderhog 2. That was the name of it, Wonderhog, because skydivers have a sense of humor. That's the Wonderhog 2 parachute rig. The upper half is my 26-foot Navy conical reserve parachute, which is a surplus Navy parachute. That's exactly it is exactly what Naval Air Crew used. And the bottom, the slightly bulgier part, was my Cloud Light 230 square foot main canopy, and I believe it was by Strong Enterprises. Standard Bell crash helmet. Kruger Thunderbolt 2 jumpsuit. I just bought it because the name's Thunderbolt. And I was in the Army at SON-DZ at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And that's a UH-60, not even an A model, just a straight UH-60. They had only been at the unit about a year. And we were very fortunate to get to have such an incredible lift platform. We could be at 10,000 feet in just a couple of minutes with 14, 16 jumpers on there. And there's cars going up and down the street back here. Oh, the motor noise you probably hear it is my little. This does have a spin. Even though it's a new computer, it does have a spinning hard drive or fan or whatever. Yeah, it's noisy fan. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, Longwood, you're close. The closest I've ever been to see a launch was at Jetty Park, and you feel them from there. I saw a Delta II go up, and I took my couple of my favorite nephews and their granddad out and move mic away. Okay, stand back here. But anyway, move the mic away from the fan. Yeah, unfortunately, there's only about that much distance between them. Go over here with it. But at Jetty Park, if there's a launch, you are going to feel it. I mean, it's like, it's cool. And that's not even the big rocket. The Delta II is like their average booster. I think the 4 is a really, really big one. The turnbuckles. Yes, I wanted to talk about that. Now Bruce is sending me some of those eye pins, which look like they'll make nice turnbuckles. But one of the I talked about it last night. In fact, I'll go see if I can fish up the photo just real quick here. The turnbuckles that were sent to the gas patch turnbuckles that were sent to me, they're 1/48 scale, and they are tiny. And he also sent me some line that he uses, which is basically a knitting thread. Let me see, was it this one? Just look, there it is. Okay. All right. You guys can gather by the size of the X-Acto knife in the background how tiny this is. I simply could not get either my monofilament line or my the thread that he sent to me to get through the eyelet, so I wound up gluing it to it. Took about 4 tries, finally got it to adhere. Had to use my little hands. Oh, thanks, Trace. I do appreciate it. Yeah, here's the thing: is these things were really hard. This one to get on, but once you get it on the airplane, it looks really good, and it does look scale. So you kind of have to pick your poison. Let me see here. Let's see if I get the picture. La 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 la. Come on. This is absolutely my first time ever using these things, so it was, my work was not a work of art, but when you actually get it on the airplane, there it is right there. It really does look good. Now, on the horn down there on the left is where I just glued the and by the way, those horns are supposed to be gray. This is before I touched up the paint on the tail, but this is the top one is the turnbuckle, and the bottom one, the one on the horn, and the bottom one, the bottom actually drilled a hole in the tail and looped the thread through it, and then this is actually a glue joint on the horn, and of course when you back away from it, it's when you back away from it some distance, they look okay. When you get real close, you definitely see the difference. So it's kind of the difference between the model being on display up on your shelf or being judged at a model building contest or something. This is definitely an acquired skill, and I'm going to have to practice with it. One of the things that I was warned about after I'd already started building things, but I'll take the note next time, is prep work is everything. Get your turnbuckles and everything glued together before you start building the model, and get them attached to the part, and then build the model. That way if you have to drill a hole or something, because they do have a little stem sticking off on the right side of the needle nose, you can bend that and glue that into a small pilot hole. I've got to get a smaller pin vise. My little tiny pin vise broke. The little tiny pin vise needle or drill bit broke. So I have to go get another one. And the one I have right now, putting holes in that are too big. But I don't have the picture with me. But in the book that I was given for the Wingnut Wings construction, the turnbuckles that those guys, and I know they're essentially professional model builders, but the turnbuckles they have on there are awesome. I mean, they're taking these incredibly close-in photographs. Let me just look real quick. Just gonna. Let's see. I'm looking to see if there's a blown up photograph that I can. Okay. Ah, here we go. This is... Whoops. What did I just do? As long as you don't hear your doctor say that or your pilot, you're doing okay. Okay, here we go. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I didn't even think of doing it this way. Let me just get this here real quick. Oops, that's not what I want. Here we go. And paste and crop and file, save as live stream 18 turns. Okay. Close that. Be back with you in a second, guys. Almost there. Almost there. Man, this guy does some stellar work. Okay. Let's go add image. Go to live stream 18. Here we go. Okay. Look at that. That's what I need to be doing. That is impressive work. And the Wingnut Wings kits do come with little they have the little holes where it's supposed to go in. No, Bruce says the eyelets will probably show up tomorrow. And yeah, isn't that something? I'm just now getting the messages, so like I say, there's a bit of a delay. But well, that now I know how to proceed from here. That's incredible. Wondered how those buggers did that. Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm not sure how many I'll do that way before I'll probably wind up drooling on myself. Now, there is a point to be made also. Yeah, I need that was the biggest problem. The ones with those little 1/48 scale ones is I just couldn't get them threaded. So I wound up gluing it to it. But they still, even if you glue them on, I use CA glue, of course, because they're metal, but it still looks good. And in the end, that's really what matters. Now, let me show you some image. Okay, okay. Now, this is what I did last night. Now, one of the things about this, with the struts like this, is, of course, Wingnut Wings already has little holes on there for the thread. So, but also because of the way these struts are designed, it's very easy simply to tie off the rigging material at the base of the strut. Put a dab of glue on it, a dab of paint, and it looks really good. Again, probably wouldn't win any awards, but it looks great on the shelf. And it's a lot easier than dealing with turnbuckles. But a lot of those things, it just depends on how into it you want to get. And I mean, I do a kit model YouTube channel, so I guess I kind of owe it to myself to make, to learn how to do this, to make it a better model. But it's not the kind of thing anybody's going to hold against you if you just go ahead and glue straight to the base. But no, they're not just, well, I guess depending on how far in you want to glue them. No, they're just fixed little units. But I was actually looking at a real biplane a while back. I was looking at that and I was thinking, on these models, it's this fragile, thin piece of wire on this delicate thing because we're doing everything in miniature. But you actually get on the real airplane and grab those things. I mean, that's steel. They're not going anywhere. And it also just amazes me how much work it takes to make a cloth-covered biplane. What exactly is a turnbuckle? Well, kind of what the name says. It's an attach point. But you see, a turnbuckle is basically two eye screws with a giant nut between them. And you can take the steel cable that's attached to one of them, and the other one's mounted to the frame, and they both screw into the centerpiece. And the centerpiece allows you to adjust tension. So that's basically what they are. They're double eyelet bolts with a common major nut. I don't know if it's called a nut or not, but that allows you to rotate it and adjust the tension to get the turnbuckle to just the right tension. Because you got to remember, every single bracing wire on a biplane has to be balanced against the other bracing wires. And it's every bit the nightmare it sounds like. There's, and that's not even getting into the rib stitching, which thank God we don't have to do. You look at those ribs on the tail and the wing. Underneath the you see, there's a thing about those ribs that people don't understand. You can't just stretch the cloth across the rib and dope it down. It'll flap around and move no matter how taut you make it. So what you have to do is, and I only know this because I grew up on a duster strip, and guys were talking about rib stitch and Stearmans, and what's that? And they literally, every rib on the tail, on the fins, on the rudder, the ailerons, the wings, they literally go up and down around it with a needle and thread, and sew, and it goes all the way through the wing and back up to the side, and sew that rib to the fabric to the rib so it can't move. And then usually they put another strip of fabric over the top of it and dope that down. Again, every bit as time consuming as it sounds. Which is one of the reasons, as soon as they mastered monocoque fuselages and cantilevered wings, they quit they quit making airplanes out of fabric except for specialty aircraft. Are they still used? Oh yeah, turnbuckles are used not just in aircraft. They're used in all kinds of things. They're used in boats and everything else. Wherever you need a cable or a stay that you adjust tension, go to any sailboat. Look at the stays, what us landlubbers would call the steel cables on them, and you'll see turnbuckles on them because they have to be adjusted on the masts and everything. Yep. They're a mechanical tool for adjusting tension, and judging by the fact that they're on just about everything that has to have tension adjusted, there you go. You know, once you get a technology that works, you stay with it. I tell you someplace, I think it's the first place I ever heard the word turnbuckle. Okay? Let's see how many of you boys are from the deep south. Always mashing his head against the turnbuckles. Always got him on the ropes. Oh yeah, the World Wrestling Federation. It's Tiger Cat Thompson against Dusty Rhodes. Yeah, that should bring back a few memories. Good times, huh? And you know what? I think I'm going to leave that one up there just for... That impresses me, it does. Flying headbutts. He's got him in the sleeper hold. Oh my God. Growing up, this is when I was building models as a kid and riding my bicycle. You know, those are the happy times if you remember. But my next door neighbor, who was about 3-4 years older than me, ergo somewhat larger, was an enormous wrestling fan. And we had a trampoline in our front yard. Come on, wrestle. You know, I don't want to. I'll go out and get, my mom's like, go out and get some exercise. Come on, Nick, give him some exercise. Like, Mom, he's going to kick my ass. And, you know, but he's got him in the leg lock. He's got him in the sleeper. And all of a sudden, the Vulcan, you know, death pinch doesn't seem quite so far-fetched. The DC-10 slat system. If you ever want to see a real nightmare, look at the wiring harness on any jet. Modern, old, doesn't matter. And you realize how dependent we are. You know, the mechanical systems in these old airplanes are very primitive, but they're straightforward. But you start getting into stuff that's installed during manufacturing, like wiring, and you're like, oh my God. Probably the hardest thing for any airline to do is to rewire an airplane, because now you're talking about getting into parts of an airplane that were not meant to be removed. Yeah. Sorry, just reading some of the comments. Oh yeah, and I remember when wrestling, it was the guy with the biggest beer gut usually won, and but it's still a big business though. Of course, now the guys are all ultra buff and everything, and you got as many women in the audience as anything else, and a couple of ladies I know, they love Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, they watch him every time he's on TV. When he's in town, they go to the shows. They live for that stuff. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, the E10 has a backup system that's good. One of the things that kind of freaked me out was the first jet I flew, the Canadian-built CRJ. It had 3 PCUs, power control units, on every control surface, but there were mechanical backups if the actual cables going back there on the older ones if something went wrong. Then I went to the Embraer products. They said the only mechanical reversion you have is on the rudder. And I was like, I don't like the sound of that. But, okay, John. Well, thanks for joining us. Glad you're able to make it. But apparently it hasn't really caused any serious problems. The problems Airbus had were largely self-induced, people who weren't properly trained. I don't think the actual fly-by-wire system on an Airbus has been the root of the mishap. It's been the people were not trained adequately and were not doing something they should have done. Killer Kowalski in the claw. Oh man, I can't remember most of them now, but that was, those guys really did. They're more like stuntmen. They really did, even though a lot of it was just a show. A lot of them really did get injured, and there was a lot of physicality in it. And a lot of these guys are pretty beat up, but a few of them were smart enough to learn how to capitalize and commercialize on it. But most of those guys led pretty rough lives. Celebrity deathmatch. Wiring and rigging a model must be a nightmare. Yeah, it kind of is. It helps to enjoy what you're doing, though. One of the things I'm learning by doing this is I have got to take it with the attitude of this is something to do when you're kind of in the mood, you feel like doing it. Don't go into it with the idea of I've got to start this to get it finished, because you'll start rushing and it's the easiest thing in the world to mess up. Or perhaps I should say it's the easiest thing in the world to mess up. The claw was Baron von Raschke. I knew the minute I brought up old world wrestling, that was a lot of memories are going to start to flow. Gordon Soley, that was the guy who emceed virtually and narrated virtually every one of those things I saw. He was big in the South, and I'm your host, Gordon Soley. Use a stoat or weasel with cord. I don't know what a stoat or weasel is. Elaborate, please. The rock. Oh, you had to go there. 1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana more. That's got to be the ultimate earworm. That's right upside shaving a haircut 2 bits. I can actually remember building models watching wrestling. The wrestler with Mickey York, yeah, it kind of does show the ugly side of it. When you say it, unfortunately, where I grew up, if you mention Vern and television stuff like wrestling, the Vern that pops into mind is from the old commercials that the Ernest character is always talking to Vern. Vern, I just came up with an idea. I'm an entrepreneur. And Benny Hill, I'd buy that for $1. Yeah, I think they stole that in RoboCop. But Jim Varney, that was his name. Thank you. Yes, Jim Varney. And he died young, like 51. Apparently, he was a pretty heavy smoker. Yukon Eric Bitkillers. God. Oh, yeah, there it goes. La, 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 la. Reggie, the crowd crusher. You know, when I first heard that movie, before I knew what it was about, The Big Lebowski, the first thing that popped in my head was, this is a movie about wrestlers? Yeah, sad. 51 years old, man. And he was a funny guy. Yeah, we had it on Saturday. And it was shot on a set, but it was I mean, we knew what it was. But they actually had a lot of magazines about wrestling too, and I hope all that blood they put on the covers is fake blood, because man, those guys are always bleeding. Ming, M-E-N-G, I know got some, if not all, the molds. Apparently their DR1 and perhaps some of their other kits are I've heard that they got the molds, and I've heard that they got the patterns, and that they made their own molds off the patterns. And obviously they're not talking about it. So, you know, the inner workings of a model business are just like any business. They're not in the habit of advertising what they do. It's you know, they consider it a trade secret. And I have sent the occasional odd email just on the off chance I get an answer. And, you know, guys like at Atlantis, they're happy to talk about it, but most of the bigger companies are very, they're very hush-hush about it. But, again, if I was running a company like Dragon or Ming or something like that, and I saw that Wingnut Wings has gone out of business, the thing that I would do is, if I could, I would buy as many of the molds as possible, if for no other reason to keep someone else from getting them. And I know we had this conversation recently, but I'll just tap on it again. There are people out there who buy kits based on brand loyalty. And, you know, I buy Tamiya and I'm going to buy Tamiya. If somebody gets Wingnut Wings kits, I'm still going to buy Tamiya, and that's fine. But there are a lot of people out there who don't. A lot of people out there that are just shopping for a model, either a specific item or just whatever good deal they can find. And they don't care who made it. They just want the item. And if you got to think about it, if you can buy the molds off of a company, you just saved yourself a ton of time. And since the Wingnut Wings kits were actually molded in China, that means the molds are resident in China. No doubt at the facility that was contracted to shoot the injections for them. That means if I buy the molds from Wingnut Wings, most likely those molds have not moved a centimeter. They're still in the same machines and the same warehouses they were in before. It's a turnkey. It can be a turnkey operation if it's not in-house. Like when Aurora sold their molds, they shot their own stuff. Okay, you just got the molds. If you wanted to have the product made, you had to set it up yourself. But something like Wingnut Wings, who did not shoot their own stuff, they had it done on contract. Depending on what happened to those molds at the time, and I'm guessing they were just locked away where they were at, you could simply go to possibly to the same company and say, just start making them again, only we're going to come up with new boxes and stuff like that. So it's a hugely varying degree whether or not the molds, acquiring the molds puts you in a near turnkey operation or in an operation that's you got to set everything up. When Johan sold a lot, when a lot of his molds wound up going wherever they went, he was using old machines with small plantons that simply did not fit a lot of existing machinery. So there were only a handful of people out there who could probably make much use out of them with spending a lot of money, and that explains probably why they went to smaller operators who either had that style of equipment or could acquire it. But a big company that was already making their own kits, like, if they were going to buy, and since a lot of Johan's molds were left out in the weather and rusted and had all kinds of problems, a lot of people didn't see him as a threat, which is one reason so few Johan kits have ever gone back into production. One reason. And well, you know, Trez, you bring up a good point about it takes a lot of effort to get Wingnut Wings out of a Rodin kit. I don't want to say they're selling to different customer bases. That's not correct. They're probably selling to the same customer base, but within that base, you have a lot of people who are like, one group wants the wingnut wings, which really has become the standard for World War One models. And then you've got other people that go, that's great, but I really don't need that much. I'm more of a casual builder. I'm just not going to get... So it's complicated. It's a business like any other, and unfortunately, as we're all getting older and you know, kids aren't getting into the hobby like they used to, we're fighting over ever increasingly small, but arguably more discerning audience. And one of the things I think I'm going to do, kind of drifting onto that, is I need to get down to the military museum about 30 miles from here and ask them if there's anything in my collection that they might like, because I think I'm going to start making some room by looking at models and just go, okay, if you guys want to have this for your displays, you're welcome to it, because otherwise they're just going to sit, you know, collecting dust and off in the corner, you know, some forgotten corner of the TARDIS. And there are some models I want to keep that I enjoy having, and others I'm kind of like, you know, this is an okay build, but I got no place to put it, and I don't want to see it get damaged. So a lot of places like museums and stuff will sometimes, if some folks are asking about what to do with your kits, and that's one option. Yeah, Jeff, that's precisely my point. Are there any issues with the molds and limitations of machines that can cast the parts? Yeah, John, there actually are. When Todef invented his slide side method, which allowed for car bodies to basically be made entirely in one piece, and I'm not sure he's the first one to do it, but apparently he was the first one to do it in such a way that, you know, had the high detail and everything that we know today, and could be shot out in large numbers. You had to have specialty mold. You couldn't use the old style molds, the old molding machines. Apparently, his system was, you had, you know, it had to go in. It had to have these things that came in on the side and stuff. And as molding technology evolved over time, of course, the molds go in a frame, and the frame is made for the machine. Generally speaking, I probably should ask Andy about that, but this is the way I've got it. Now, you can make a frame for any mold that will adapt to any, but frames are expensive. We're talking about 800-pound chunks of steel. And, of course, the mold is an insert that goes in there. Back in the day, they used beryllium copper before everybody realized how dangerous the stuff was, that it could be toxic. And you just made these incredible molds. But a lot of times, if I'm not mistaken, each frame is specific to each model, because when you put in all the plantons and everything, or all the inserts, they make a different shape, and the thing's got to hold them absolutely, positively still. And this is not a minor thing. When you have people that have old molds that are a different shape, that you could wind up with this big molding machine, or the reverse could happen. You wind up with these big molds and it won't fit in your machine, and the whole thing can get out of hand in a hurry. I don't know how. What I don't know is who makes the actual molding machines. I know when Airfix first started, they actually bought a commercially, actually I think it was England's first commercially available injection molder. But over time, more companies start making these. I don't know if they're custom built or if they were made by manufacturers on any kind of a fixed scale. But I have heard of companies that bought molds from other companies, and there was no way they could get them in their machines. And I've heard different reasons. Some of them had to do with, I think, just the physical dimensions. And you're like, well, why not just take out the inserts and make your own frame that the inserts would go into their molding machines, which is what you would have to do. But that's an expensive process, and I would imagine some of them just looked at it and said, yeah, this is just not worth it. This is probably one of the things that helped come up with the rise of resin casting by a lot of the specialty companies, is because you can do anything with resin if you know what you're doing, as long as you've got someone who can make a good pattern. But the injection molding machines, I don't know that much about the machines themselves, only that technology changed over time, and ones like the old Johan molds became extremely problematic in newer machines. And I assume it had to do with the fact that the Johan used these really small plantons that just are small frame machines, that the planton on them was only so big, and it just didn't. Now you're going, somebody else gets the molds and they got this more modern machine, there's just no way to fit it. And the idea of cutting an entirely new frame for this model that you might sell 30,000 of, real quick, the math on that doesn't add up. This is my very loose understanding of it. But apparently also, since if you're going to use a mold for a side slide machine, you've got to have that capability in your machines. And remember, you have to be able to crank these things out quickly too. If it's possible, I suppose, that you could just put the side inserts in manually, but how much time is that going to take? You need to knock these, you need 60, 70 of these things coming out of the mold every hour. Vickers American was right. That what Charles said. Yeah, John, I was mentioning that's why resin casting has become so popular. There's almost, if you've got a good pattern maker, there's nothing you can't do in resin. It helps that they have the flexible molds. But part of the figure is a big part of the machine. Sagger parts. Yeah, that's right. I'd forgotten about that. The side slide machines, they take a more highly trained operator and they take more time. They do not have the high production rate. But the return for that is you get this very nice deep three-dimensional cut. And by the way, just as a quick side note, an adjunct to that, the deeper a mold is, like the half of a horse, or a lot of these wildlife molds, the more expensive it is to cut, because the more steel that has to be, the more medium that has to be removed. I actually learned this from Pete Vetri over at Atlantis. Apparently making something like a horse or a bear or a wildlife mold where you have a very deep cavity on the two halves, those can be the most expensive to cut, just because of all the time and everything it takes to remove all the medium to make not the plug, not the inside, but the actual outer casting. And I don't know how much that holds today, but apparently that's been a big deal on some of them they've made, which is one reason that manufacturers prefer to make, if possible, shallower or flatter parts. Slapping out some helicopter rotor blades is going to be a lot easier and cheaper than stamping out the hull of a ship, the big one-piece hull. And that would also help explain why so many companies want to make waterline ships, because that hull piece is half the depth it would make for, and doesn't have all the detail because it doesn't have all the skegs and everything, the props. So that would make it a much cheaper model to set up to manufacture, or at least that's my understanding. The Gundam. You mentioned the Gundam plastic. Now that I've built a couple, I can speak with a hint of authority. I've got to tell you that I am extremely impressed, not only with the quality of the Gundam pressings, but also the quality of the engineering, as well as the execution. They really do. Their plastic probably has a little more flex in it than a lot do, but you need it with something like that. But I've been very impressed with. I'm astonished as much by their engineering as I am by their execution. But they really do a fine job. They also have the advantage of being the most produced models out there by far, and with the kind of money they have, they can have top rate equipment, good engineers, good people working the line. A Weasley is the lesser of two weasels. Let's see. Now, John Scratchy's asking if Revell did a 1/32 356. And guys, if you want to know about casting in resin and stuff, John Fast Sports, he's done some. Go to check out his channel. He's been doing some beautiful work lately. Revell's okay. Scratchy, Revell's was 125 scale. Yep, Jim Varney. Ernest. He was funny. Um, the last trumpeter kit I built was that FT5, and it was, of course, it was one of their earlier attempts. It had some weird plastic, and it was just an unusual model. They had a ton of options, but the instructions weren't terribly clear, and I wound up using online reference photos, and it was different. I was I know they make some good stuff, but it was a they've gotten better. Let's just say they've gotten better over time. If you guys see that old kit of the FT5 and the box art shows it in red and white markings, kind of, and it just says FT5 from Trumpeter, I'm not going to put that on the recommend list unless you want an FT5, which is basically a two-seat Chinese MiG-17 trainer, fighter trainer. It's a fighter and a trainer. Huh. Jim Varney was, when I was in the Army, he was, they showed a lot of the commercials with him in them. I think he was down around the Kentucky area at the time doing a lot of his work before he got his movie. That's how his commercials led to his movie playing the same character. And definitely a talented guy, but he got cast, and he kind of created this character the same way Bob Denver invented Gilligan, and the rest of his life, that's what he was. And it was, smear kits, that doesn't surprise me. A lot of flash. But it's funny that a lot of actors are classically trained, but they wind up creating these either comedic or villainous characters, and that's what they wind up playing for the rest of their careers. And it keeps the rent paid, but you have no idea that this person was actually classically trained. Some of you may know that Werner Klemper, who played Colonel Clank on Hogan's Heroes, was actually a concert violinist, and he deliberately played poorly on the show as part of the comedy, but he was actually an outstanding violinist. His father had been Otto Klemper, the composer. A lot of these other actors, like I said, Bob Denver played Gilligan, typecast for the rest of his career, but he was actually a serious actor. He'd always been in comedy for the most part, done Dobie Gillis and stuff, but George Lindsay played Goober, got tagged with that the rest of his life, and Jim Nabors is Gomer Pyle. But the one of them that managed to break the mold on that was Andy Griffith. He played Sheriff Taylor, and by all accounts, he was kind of playing the person he was, but then he wanted to break that character, so he went on and played some villains and he'd actually played one of them. Oh, what was the name of that movie he did with Patricia Neal and Walter Matthau? Facing the Crowd, I think was the name of it. Wow, man, he's still playing kind of the country bumpkin, but he was definitely played a dark character in that one. That's worth a watch. Or Orson Welles in A Touch of Evil. And Fred Gwynn, yeah. Of course, Fred Gwynn was kind of cursed with being, 6'5", 6'6", and he passed out on stage in that costume a couple of times. People forget he was wearing that big chest padding and everything. They didn't, what they needed and didn't have back then was some kind of liquid cooling system in that thing. And Jim Nabors put out many albums. He was a very accomplished singer. Yeah, A Face in the Crowd, though, you'll never watch Andy Griffith the same way. For those who are familiar with the old Mayberry series. Yep, Jack Benny was also good. These guys you have to be that good to play that bad, as a joke on purpose. I'd like to see the old mold making machines myself. It's, I'm sure all of us would love to spend a day in a factory popping a few of them out of the mold, just kind of been there, done that. But I talked to Nick Argento, and he grew up in a plastics manufacturing family. So he was raised with the industry, and he was like, if you told him when he was a kid he was going to be doing this as a grown up, he'd have gone out and played in traffic. Yeah. Not only was Gary Berghoff a skilled drummer, but so was going back to Hogan's Heroes, so was Robert Crane or Bob Crane. He was an excellent drummer. He actually used his skills one time in the show. And here's your trivia question. Back in the 60s, when Westerns ruled Hollywood, the art of the fast draw became they actually had fast draw clubs all over the United States. And Angela Lansbury not only did a great job in The Manchurian Candidate, but she was only about 4 years older than Lawrence Harvey, and he was supposed to be her son. She always had that older looking face. I didn't know Johnny Carson was a drummer. Okay. So now Ben Shapiro could jam on the band. Makes sense. But Hollywood had these fast draw clubs, and they clocked them, and they had it all very carefully monitored. Guess who was the fastest fast draw artist of the movie stars in Hollywood? I'll give you guys a minute to work on that one. Yeah, I knew Steve Martin made the banjo part of his routine. And before the character did use his speed of the fast draw in one movie. Glenn Ford was number 4. Sammy Davis Jr. was number 2. Or, no, I think Glenn Ford was number 2 and Sammy Davis was number 4. They were both like in the top 5. Jerry Lewis. Frank gets the trophy. Jerry Lewis, believe it, Mr. Ed. Yes, Jerry Lewis was the fastest fast draw artist in Hollywood. And him, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, James Arness, Glenn Ford, all of them were in those clubs. Ford was up in the top 5. I think Sammy Davis used it. Glenn Ford, Sammy Davis, and Dean Martin all used it in movies. James Arness was on the list. And I don't know if they all learned from the famous Arvo Ojala or not. I saw the video of Sammy Davis using it in his show, and he was definitely quick. And mind you, Wilbur, mind you that we're talking the difference between being first and second place being in microseconds. In fact, it's been pointed out, of course, Gunfighters of the Old West, that whole fast draw thing's a Hollywood creation. Gunfighters of the Old West pretty much, just came out and shot you. But all the gunfights where two guys went out and slapped leather like in the movies could be counted probably on one hand. Most famous one being, of course, OK Corral. But the Slugo, naughty boy. But the fast draw, most people, like the gun buffs who've looked at it, have said, the so-called experts have said that if you actually had two guys that were that fast, inertia alone would carry them through. In other words, if they drew on each other, they'd cap each other. Even if one got the shot off first, it would have been so fast the other one, the top dozen people just shot each other if they'd been in a battle with each other, because they're going so fast. The difference wouldn't really. It was, of course, they're shooting blanks and drawing against the clock. It's all in good fun. Yeah, Audie Murphy did a lot of westerns in his time, but I'm going to tell you something. Audie Murphy was a very haunted individual. A lot of people don't talk about it, but because he's the most highly decorated American in history. But he had some pretty hardcore PTSD. He always slept with a gun under his pillow, and he squandered a lot of his money gambling, because what happened was after the war he'd become basically, for the gay way, I guess we call it, an adrenaline junkie, and gambling gave that sense of adventure, got that adrenaline pumping. And a lot of people don't know that Audie Murphy was also an accomplished songwriter. He's actually in my book, Music's Broken Wings, and he was he was a very well, there were a lot of layers to him, and yeah, back then they just called it battle fatigue or whatever. Yeah, Bob Crane. Everybody knows about his extracurricular activities, and he was interesting. And I'll let that go at that. I think you guys all know where that's going. If not, Google it. Well, you talk about people who did a lot in that because everybody's got a history, and the look up Leon Askin, who you might know as General Burkhalter, or Werner Klemper or John Banner. All the guys from Hogan's Heroes, colorful backgrounds, Robert Clary, and all of them. There's when you watch television shows from the 60s and 70s, you tend to forget a lot of these actors were of the greatest generation. They were still fairly young men then. And I knew that Bob Crane had been a DJ. So had the late Tim Conway started as a DJ. A lot of these guys did. You guys remember the Mary Tyler Moore show, Ted Knight? Played Ted Baxter. He was a decorated war veteran from World War II, and we all know Lee Marvin was, and what's his name from the Tonight Show? Ed McMahon. He was a Marine Corps aviator carrier qualified. I think he'd flown Hellcats in the Second World War. A lot of guys, real interesting backgrounds, and I love that thing with. The one time they mentioned on Tonight Show is they brought out this toy with this aircraft carrier that had these planes on wires. You'd launch them and it'd come back. You try to land it on the carrier with this control stick, and he was teasing that Ed should have an advantage because he'd done it for real. And Captain Newman, that was I think it was Gregory Peck. I believe that had didn't that have young Tony Curtis? Tony Curtis served on a submarine in the Second World War. That's why he did Operation Petticoat. He'd always wanted to do a submarine movie. Actually, Barry, I think they all were. Hochstetter, Klink, Schultz, and Burkhalter were all Jewish. I think was it Cohen that played Burkhalter or played Hochstetter? He was an American. The other three were either German or Hungarian Jews, and they'd all left for the same reason. Yep, Leslie Howard's killed during the war. Yep, Carson was in the Navy. He was an enlisted man in the Navy. And don't start the Mr. Rogers myth. Mr. Rogers was never in the military, and but the when I was in the Pittsburgh airport, because he'd started his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which used models in that at the local PBS channel there, I think they actually had some of his on the airport. They had some of his personal effects and letters and stuff on display, and a big thing about how he was never in the service and all that stuff. And hey, Jimi Hendrix even did a year in the Army before they mutually decided he didn't need to be in the Army. It's Brigadier General Jimmy Stewart. And a lot of those guys. And if somebody had the research and material, it'd be hard to find. That'd be interesting too. Model the actual airplane or tank or whatever that who would later be Hollywood stars, used during the war, like Jimmy Stewart's B-24 or Clark Gable's B-17 or something like that. So Ed McMahon's Hellcat, if you could find it. Richard Todd, the British actor who was the real deal. And he was actually wearing his real para beret in what was it? Was it Longest Day, I believe? And Robert Clary, LeBeau. Yep, he was in a camp. Yeah, rough times. And no, actually, Hendrix, I was in the 101st, and his tenure there is well known. He only did about a year in the Army. Hendrix had gotten a beef as a teenager, and the judge gave him an option of join the service or do some time in the county pokey. So he joined the Army, but he was never what we call a strack troop. He was always he didn't want to be there. And after about a year, he and the Army decided to part ways. And I think he was honorably discharged or chaptered out, but he did serve, so he rates the flag on his coffin. And Mr. Bean, the greatest English actor. Well, it's a little cliche, but I think I'd probably go with Yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know, Peter Sellers. Be a coin toss between Peter Sellers and Sir Alec Guinness. But hey, Tony. Well, you're here. We're just jibber jabbering at this point about where it pops in our minds. And time to rearrange the desk cam just to do something. And now for something completely different. See if I can make this look a little bit like the Boneyard. Now, Rowan Atkinson actually is an excellent actor, and I saw him on YouTube recently talking. He was at some kind of convention. He was talking about the state of comedy these days, political correctness. He's actually, most comedians are very bright. You have to be that insightful to write good comedy. And I listened to him speak about the current affairs of comedy as it relates to society and how everything is being banned. It was a very insightful little commentary that he gave. I was very impressed. It's like the guys at Monty Python. Okay. I think he was. I think Chris Lee did do something. So did Sterling Hayden, if I'm not mistaken. But you look at sharply written comedy, and I know everybody's got a different taste in comedy, and British comedy is one of the hardest to understand, I guess, if you're not English. But you look at Monty Python, and when you're a kid, it just seems like silly humor. But as you get older and start looking at it, you start to really see the genius behind it. And the same with the Blackadder series. You really start to appreciate how smart these guys are. And Cleese had made the comment that him and Idlebath have watched their interviews that have come up recently on the YouTube, and they are writers, not actors. They classify themselves as writers, and they said that's one reason there was no ad-libbing on Monty Python. No writer can stand to have his work modified, so they never modified the work because they wrote it. And I thought that was a pretty interesting observation. But then you look Atkinson and these other guys; they're brilliant. Benny Hill was a bit on the base side, but a lot of the well, you only have to watch a couple of episodes of Fawlty Towers, and you start to realize just Python as well as running a product. John, I'm not surprised, because it's only as I've gotten a little older and started to appreciate how hard, not only how hard, but how insightful much of it is. And you don't realize how often Monty Python is a commentary on something. It's yeah, some people, I've heard it said, I'm not sure I agree, but I've heard it said that Fawlty Towers may be the best comedy ever done. I'm not sure I'd go with that, but it was good. Yeah, the Fawlty Towers episode on the Germans may be one of the best things ever written and acted out. And oh my God, that was hilarious. And I didn't start it. You started it. He started it when you invaded Poland. I saw that one coming. I was waiting for that one. 81, both with RC components. It's funny. The stuff that Tamiya put in there, a lot of people don't realize that Tamiya has been surprisingly active in RC, even though they're not one of the big RC brands. They are within Armor. You know, when you say radio control, most people think airplanes or at least cars. But we had an RC car from Tamiya that my brother-in-law's dad built, and he built the whole thing in a day, and it went together like a Swiss watch, and everything worked. I went by and they said, "You want to build this?" I opened that box, and nope, there had to be 1,000 parts in there, and we didn't have the instruction sheet. But he was an electrical engineer, and I came back that afternoon. There it was running around in circles. Like, how in the heck? He goes, "Oh, it was all pretty intuitive." I'm like, "Whoa!" Next thing you know, you'll be rigging biplanes. But it's almost a shame to build one of that vintage because it's kind of a time capsule, not only for the kit itself, but for the technology of the day. But hey, if you can get together and make it work, you're a better man than I, Gunga Din. Are you being sort of? I remember that one. And it was Keeping Up Appearances with Hyacinth Bouquet, and they had an episode, one of the earlier episodes, when the girl that was on the cast that played the somewhat slutty, was it sister-in-law of Onslow or something? But anyway, she says she's always trying to pick guys up in bars. She goes, "I picked this man up, and he asked if I wanted to come over and see his model aeroplanes." And I was like, well, but of course. And she went with him. He goes, "And I went to his apartment, and it was full of model aeroplanes. And we spent all night talking about model aeroplanes. Ask me anything you want to know about model aeroplanes." Rose, thank you. Thank you. The transmission for the 77 Tamiya Sherman. That would be, I don't know, you probably snoop around, might find one. It's amazing how much of the stuff is still out there. Think about how many models, and I mean expensive ones too, that have that stuff. They just ended up in a box that no one ever built. I've got a few of them on my shelf that are from the 80s that a friend of mine said, I've had that since, 88, never did get around to building it. And they're still waiting in the queue out in the Tarbis right now. Bouquet residence. Hyacinth Bouquet. You see, everybody remembers their favorite lines from these things. Buddy Hackett had a great one that always stuck with me. He was talking about when they tried to get him to go skiing, and he has the German ski instructor who says, "Do you ski?" "No, the Jew don't ski." Fly to the... I got halfway through. As soon as it runs across the floor. Tell you something, you wind up and it runs across the floor. I build models. Now there's a serious model builder. Dorfman. Mr. Dorfman. Don't you think it's best we don't tell the guys that you build toy airplanes? Oh man, old what's his name? Harvey, the German actor. He was perfect for that role. Richard Bouquet, the ultimate milk toast. Oh, absolutely. What Apostolos just said. Hardy Kruger, thank you. Hardy Kruger. By the way, quick side note, talking about movies and models. Biggest model of a Sherman tank ever made was for the movie, A Bridge Too Far. 1-to-1, 100%. Just like the P-40s and Tora Tora Tora. They were fiberglass. They cast the real tank and made fiberglass shells that were 100% full-size models of Sherman tanks made out of fiberglass. But, because they didn't have enough real Shermans. And they put little motors so that the tracks would turn. But they were mounted them on Volkswagens. The irony is not lost on me. But... they had to drive with the track about 2 inches off the ground, so they always had to make sure there was some shrubbery or something covering where they're supposed to contact the ground. And I was like, I wonder where they got that idea. Oops. Okay, crash. So anyway, they would drive, I think they called them the Doodlebug tanks because they were built on Sherman, or on Volkswagen chassis. Anyway, and they used them for the crossing the bridge scenes and stuff like that, and a lot of the open road scenes. But they're 1-to-1 scale models. And Hardy Kruger, who played, I think, an SS Panzergeneral or something in that, he was, because he had to wear the black uniform. I don't know if he was supposed to be Waffen SS or SS Panzer, but Kruger, being a German kid, he was a child during the Second World War. He had to be in the Hitler Youth. He didn't have a choice, and it always bothered him. And they said whenever he was not on camera, he had an overcoat on to cover the uniform because he didn't like running around in it. A lot of bad memories. But the thing about A Bridge Too Far is they went to a lot of trouble to give that an authentic look. Not only did they make the extra fiberglass tanks and everything, when the German artillery, the anti-tank guns, get bombed by the Royal Air Force, they didn't have the correct aircraft, but they didn't want to just use AT-6s. So they went through a lot of trouble to mock up the AT-6s to make them look different. They kind of look like Womerangs, but they did that because they just didn't want the airplane to be clearly identifiable as a trainer. I mean, when you're an aviation buff, you kind of spot, dressed up AT-6, but hey, at least they're trying, you know, like the oddball, like the Tiger that Oddball went up against in Kelly's Heroes, or the AT-6 Zeros in Tora Tora Tora. At least they're making a good faith effort to keep you in and not take you out of the movie. Oh yeah, one of the things about A Bridge Too Far they did note was that they didn't have the treads moving at the right speed. And they said as you see the tanks moving, even though you can't see the tires, you can tell the tracks are not moving at the same speed the tank is moving across the ground. Skuas. Yeah, that's what they look like. They look like... Let's go with that. Oh yeah, I was talking about that earlier. That's me skydiving at San DZ when I was in the Army. And... Okay, the Canson brothers didn't help slot car racers. Okay, Slugo, there's more to that. Let's hear it. I know, Claire, but at least they tried. You know, it looked better than using a T-34 or a Sherman or something like that. You know, there's only so much you can do. If I had to make... Now, one thing that they did do that fooled me, I didn't realize, if you guys have seen 1941, that Grant that they're running around in was built on the chassis of an M7 Priest, which had the exact same drivetrain, but the tank was just a plywood mock-up. And what I'm thinking is, if you wanted to make as accurate as possible a war movie on the kind of budget they had, what I would do is I would say, don't give me a tank. Give me a tank chassis with the turret removed, and then you could build everything up around it and make it look better instead of just boxing the existing turret. But then, of course, you got to work. If you're going to have the turret rotate, you got to work in a mechanism. You run into a lot of problems. But it would have been, you know, one tank you could probably mock up to like a Tiger, which they wouldn't have had there in Yugoslavia. I think they filmed that movie in Yugoslavia. Might have been something like a Centurion because the proportions might have been better. But if you guys have seen the movie White Tiger, which came out a few years ago, I didn't realize this until I'd seen the movie, but yeah, that whole patent was, but they used the Spanish Army. They just used what they had. Their attitude was, we're telling the story about the man. The combat scenes are kind of incidental. Okay, gotcha. There we go. What had happened in the case of White Tiger was they had contracted a company to make a working replica, 1-to-1 scale replica of a Tiger, and they did. But they didn't have it done in time. That tank actually went up for sale on eBay for like $500,000. Anyway, so they just, since the company wanted to get it done in time, they just mocked up a Russian tank to like a Tiger. And it looks like something completely fictitious. But since it's a ghost story, I guess it doesn't really matter. Still a pretty good movie, though. Hellacious battle action scenes. My God, Russians do that stuff right. You watch some of these Russian movies, these recent ones, they're really impressive. The stories may not be right, but they really put a lot of effort into them. They look good on film. But anyway, but the tank that when the people finally got the tank done that was supposed to be made for the movie White Tiger, no, of course the movie was already done and in the cans at that point, so they just put it up for sale. I think it was unpainted. But from the outside, I mean, the inside's hollow, but from the outside, it looks like a real Tiger tank, and it works, and the turret rotates. I'm sure somebody bought it. Yeah. Now, one thing that is, if you were to take a T-34 and just put the Balkan Krauls on it, that's not technically inaccurate because they used each other's captured equipment all the time. It's when you actually identify it as the foreign vehicle. I mean, there's several famous pictures of Shermans with the crosses on them, and then there's that Mark Felton did that thing on the American unit that was using the Panthers until they ran out of parts for them. FE4. Oh, okay. I did not know that's what they used. And so the FE432s were used as Panzer IVs in Saving Private Ryan. I didn't know what that was. Okay. Yeah, in fact, the Spanish came in real handy in making a lot of these movies. They have the terrain there that looks close enough to write, and they had a lot of the vehicles, and they used combat troops. And a lot of times, all you had to do is pay and feed the troops. That was all it took. They did the Battle of Britain basically for the cost of fuel and taking care of the pilots. They couldn't believe the deal they were getting. If it hadn't been the Spanish Air Force, the Battle of Britain would have been nothing like it actually was. And we're just lucky they happened to be using more or less the same aircraft that the Germans used during the war. Yeah, I noticed they used a CJ2. I caught that in the opening scene, and I was kind of like, well, that's cheap. But, yeah. This thing keeps bouncing between an excellent screen, excellent and poor. You need to change your video. I did change the video. Oh, I got to do that when I get up. Oh. Well, guys, we've been going for 2 hours, and anything you guys want to talk about before we go? Yeah, tank. At least it's with the movie Tank with James Garner. They identified the tank for what it was, and yeah, they have you got to admit the Stug 4, Stug 3, Stug 4. When you look at what it could do for what it was actually arguably one of the most cost-effective armored vehicles of the Second World War, and it's great to model. I mean, everybody makes models of that thing because it's just a fun kit to build. It is what it is. Balsa Wood aircraft. I actually have a bunch of balsa wood aircraft that I don't know if I'm ever going to get around to, plus some plans for some others. So many models, so little time. Yeah, there's not much they could do about that. Of course, now they actually have a couple of working Messerschmitts that they can use in the movies, I think. But my wife watched me during Dunkirk, the dogfight scene. I'm saying, come on, pull some lead. And she's kind of like, relax me more. It's a movie. This is what movies are for. It had a 20 millimeter on it, so they did have a Marder in that one too. A lot of that old gear stayed in production and was used by countries for years after the war, so a lot of that stuff's still around. You never know when it's something that some country copied, looked similar, or it was the real thing. Yeah, it was a ambush weapon, and a good one too. And we lost one of our first Pershings to a Rhino, or a Nashorn. And you can joke about those goofy looking things all you want. When they're hiding in camouflage, you don't know it's there. Booyah. I have built one of the newer balsa wood kits, and they are definitely a quantum leap above the old stuff. Mainly, you can get the parts out more cleanly. 737 MAX, that air, Boeing isn't going anywhere, okay? But that airplane is indicative of a well-established problem that Boeing has had for some decades now in their upper management. And the problems they're having the 787 quality control issues. It's just the whole thing is that, well, put it this way, Airbus is mopping the floor with Boeing, and for good reason. And when they had that A380 debacle, Boeing was in a position to really get the upper hand on Airbus, but they squandered it. The 737 MAX is a very capable platform, but I think I've talked about this before. Their desire for commonality and the training to be the same and keep the cost down for the airlines overrode safety considerations. And it would have taken about 1 hour in the simulator of crossover training to have shown the guys how the MCAS works and where the if this starts happening, just switch this stuff off and hand fly it. And you know, a lot of people are of the belief that those mishaps would not have occurred. But my understanding is that their differences training was just an iPad program, and I'm like, dude, that's because they're selling the thing as commonality with the existing 737. It's a very different airplane. Take a look at a 737 MAX and a regular 737. And the first thing you're going to notice is the gargantuan motors hanging off the front of the engines instead of hanging under them like the other airplanes. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason that so many things on the airplane had to change to the point that it's a different airplane. Well, let's stick in a computer system so it flies the same. What happens when that computer system has some bad lines of code or something goes south? So, yeah, Blanco's talked about this. Juan has talked about this a lot, and so have pretty much everybody in aviation has. It's one reason I haven't really bothered with it. It's been pretty well covered. Everyone knows what Boeing did. They let business decisions force engineering decisions that overrode safety decisions. That was, and now they're paying for it. They've lost billions in because of it. But make no mistake, they're not going anywhere. They'll recover from this. And Delta want them to make the 737s again, or 757s again. They didn't even want the 737 MAX. They just give us, and Boeing's like, no, we're not putting the 75 back. That's out of production. It's not coming back. And but now they've got more trouble because Airbus has got their Neo engines and their new long-range narrow-body Airbuses that are getting close to being able to compete with the 737. And now you've got the Canadair 200 series, the 220s, that can compete with the 737 long-range and everything. So there you go. Gosh, I haven't been in the Nashville airport since... Well, actually, let me change that. No, I have not been there. The last time I was in Nashville, the old Nashville airport, was when I was in the Army in '83. I did go to Nashville about 15 years ago, and it's a whole new airport. So, no, I did not go there. I did not see that, but I would like to. The 101 bar. Well, guys, appreciate everybody checking in. I'm going to go ahead and shut things down. And I hope you had a good time just yakking about anything and everything. And I'm going to close out the camera and the microphone. I'll leave this up so you can chat amongst yourselves for a few minutes. We'll see everybody. Don't know about next week. Maybe, maybe not. Tomorrow I'm off to Tallahassee. So I will see you guys later. You take care, be good, and model on.